Hello again, it's Roger Watson here, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Nurse Education in Practice. And in this session, I'm going to talk about common mistakes in academic writing. That's the title of the session, and that's the subject I was asked to address here. However, first of all, I'd like to remind people of something I've said in previous videos, that I don't believe that there is any such thing as academic writing. Writing for newspapers, writing academic articles for journals, writing books, either textbooks, or writing novels, or writing chapters for books, reports, whatever. The writing is the same. There are only two types of writing, good writing and bad writing. So one of the first mistakes that people make in academic writing, if there is such a thing, is to assume that there is a style of academic writing, and that isn't the case. Of course, academic writing, what we call academic writing, which is for publication in refereed journals, serves a different purpose from other types of writing, like newspaper writing or writing books and textbooks. However, the style of writing should be the same, and the mistakes that people make in one type of writing, they will transfer into other types of writing. The difference with perhaps what we might call academic writing is that it has a very specific structure. Now, all writing, whether it's a newspaper article, a chapter, a short story, or an academic article, should have a beginning and a middle and an end. But as we already know, academic articles have got a very particular structure, running from a title, abstract, through introduction and background, to methods, and then results and discussion, conclusion, and so forth. So they are slightly different from that point of view, and you have to fit in the material that you're writing in under those headings. That's really the only difference between other types of writing and academic writing, is this very particular structure, and quite a detailed structure. And of course that structure is there to help people to find information within your article. So that's the first point, and it's a reminder of a point I made before. Don't make the mistake of thinking that there is an academic style of writing. There really isn't. There's only good writing and bad writing, and what I want to do is to encourage you to write well, perhaps by pointing to some of the mistakes that people make commonly. Now, again, this is more about content rather than process. And I think, again, that people often make a mistake of thinking that I can, someone like myself, who's had lots of experience of reading and editing academic articles, can give you a comprehensive and easy list of things not to do. And that really isn't the case. Everybody makes their own little mistakes, and there's so many different kinds of errors that can be made, that it's difficult to encapsulate them, and it's really quite difficult to know what the common ones were, but I'm going to try. But another mistake, and this is about process rather than about the content, that people make in academic writing is not writing. That may sound rather sarcastic or even facetious, but I really mean it. You've got not to be afraid, or you've got to have the courage actually to make mistakes in your writing and learn from it. So one of the mistakes that people make is not writing at all. So you've got to overcome the barriers to writing and get writing. Without writing, you won't make mistakes, but you won't learn. And the more you write, the more you'll learn how to write. So just make a start somehow to your writing. Don't be afraid. Don't ponder it too long. And I'll give you some other hints about the process in just a minute. Another common mistake that I've seen people make, and I used to make this one myself in my early days as an academic writer, was surrounding myself with all the articles that I might need. These days they'd probably be on your computer screen or on your phone, but even so, what people try to do is they read a range of articles related to what they're going to write about, for their introduction presumably to their article, and then they start trying to fit every article and every reference in, and that is wrong. It's wrong for two reasons, or really for three reasons. One of the reasons is you can end up plagiarizing and copying other people's writing. but really it makes for very disconnected writing, and it actually makes the process of writing very, very disconnected. But the third mistake is that it's not your voice, really. And I think what you've got to do is, by all means, do your background reading and be familiar with the area. You wouldn't be writing about it if you weren't familiar with it. Put all the articles aside or close them down on your computer and write what you want to write. That way it will be your voice. You won't plagiarize. You won't copy other people's writing. You won't even duplicate your own writing. Start again in your own voice and write what you want to write. Then you can go to the references to support the points that you've made. And I think that's a much better way to write. It not only leads or provides a better process for writing, it actually leads to better writing with fewer problems. So that's another part of the process of writing. And finally, on the process of writing, when I say don't be afraid to make mistakes and just make a start to your writing, what you'll find is as soon as you've made a start, your writing will flow. It's just the way it works. Making a start is the hardest part of writing. Make a start and write, but don't edit as you write. Just write. Come back afterwards and edit. So make sure that you don't think about every word that you put down while you're writing. Make as many mistakes as you want. Add in extra words if you want. Write any way you want. The most important thing is getting the writing down, and don't try to correct it as you go through. So, as I've said before, in the 4 rules, set yourself a target, write to that target, and then stop. And then you can go back either then and edit that piece of writing, or you can complete the whole article, which I think is a better thing to do, and then edit the whole article all the way through. You may have to do that several times. If you edit small sections, then I'm afraid you get stuck on that section and you may not move on to the next section. So that's one of the best hints, and it's a common hint that authors and experienced authors and editors give you, is write, don't edit. It doesn't mean to say that you don't edit at some point, but in the process you write and you don't edit. Okay, on to some of the common mistakes in content. And again, some of these have been referred to already, but the most common mistake is using too many words. You can always, as George Orwell said in the 5 Rules for Effective Writing, less is always better. And again, this is not something to worry about as you're actually writing, but go back and edit. And it's hard to give all the possible examples, but there are lots of them. And only the morning when I was making this video, I was editing an article which was due for publication in my journal, and I think I found 2 of these mistakes repeated many times by the same author. For example, many people say in order to. So we administered a questionnaire to the nurses in order to gather the information for the survey. In order to is unnecessary. All we need to say is to. We administered the questionnaire to nurses to gather the information for the survey. And again, I think I've made this point before, people who use phrases like in order to tend to use them many times. So you've got 3 words cutting down to 1 word. And if you've ever got to lose words from a piece of writing, which is often the case, then that's a good target to look for. Another one is a similar example. As people say, there were a number of reasons why nurses did not respond to the questionnaire, a number of. That can be replaced by several, and in some cases some. So again, a number of, which is 3 words, can be replaced by 1 word. So you can just say there were a number of reasons. Instead of a number of reasons, there were several reasons why the nurses didn't respond, or there were some reasons why they didn't. So again, look out for these unnecessary phrases, and certainly in the word package that I use, I don't know about the word packages that you use to write, the word packages I use actually indicate these words. It's very, very helpful. You can see them indicated with a wavy blue line underneath, so you can see them very easily. Another phrase which is common, and this is common in academic writing because people think it's part of the academic writing style, is people say things like in respect of, with regard to, and phrases at the beginning, or joining certain ideas together. Again, it's usually unnecessary to say that. What you're trying to say, instead of in regard to, regarding, 1 word is good. 3 words down to 2. or sometimes about can replace in respect of. So look out again for targets like that. But I'm just going to stepping back just a little bit. While you're writing, don't worry about this. Write like that. Put these things down because it helps you to flow, helps you to get your writing done, and that's the most important thing. Go back afterwards and edit them out. Other common mistakes are repetition. Now, I do think some repetition within an academic article is a good idea. In other words, the abstract, the main body, and the conclusion all say the same thing, but in slightly different ways. Tell them what you're going to say, tell them, and then remind them, which is an old adage about writing or giving a speech. However, try repeating things within a paragraph or within a section is not necessary. And people often do this because they lack confidence. So they'll say one thing one way, say it again another way, and maybe again another way in order to convince the reader that they know what they're talking about, or thinking that repeating it like that helps to make the point. It actually doesn't. Try to think of one clear way of making the point. And again, if you can't do this, it's helpful sometimes to ask somebody else to take a look at your writing, and they will point out perhaps where you need to go, where you need to change it, and make one clear point. Another similar mistake related to that is people using too many references. Maybe using 5 or 6 references on one point. Try to find the main reference. Don't use too many references. And regarding references, another very common mistake, usually in inexperienced writers, is to write sentences which are often too long and then gather half a dozen references at the end of it. They may all be relevant to points in the sentence, but again, that's poor writing because the reader has to think which of these points refers back to the point that's being made in the sentence. So try to put your references close to the points that you're making. That's a much better thing to do, so scatter them throughout the sentence or throughout the paragraph. So try to do that. Try not to gather them all together at the end. There's a common mistake which is often apparent in review articles, but it's apparent in other types of articles too, often in the introductions. But it's very common in reviews, and again, it's writers who are not experienced and certainly find maybe using English as a second language difficult. And it's to begin every sentence or even every paragraph with "someone said." For example, it could be me, Watson said. Then the next paragraph's about another paper, and it's Smith said, or you said, or whatever. Name, date, said. Try not to do that. Apart from anything else, the ideas should be presented in an integrated way. So if there are common ideas in all of those papers, they should be gathered together and the specific points referenced. But instead of starting off with, even if you do have to write a separate section or separate paragraph for each paper, try to find different ways of starting them. Instead of Smith said, it could be as reported in Smith and the date. Just find some different way of doing it, because it's a clear indicator of very poor writing and also very a lack of confidence in the reader about, a lack of confidence in the writer about gathering the ideas together. So those are really sort of headlines, common mistakes. There are others. It's a very difficult thing to point to, and as I say, I'm often asked this, and I find it very difficult to say don't do this, this, and this, because it really doesn't work like that. I think you've got to be willing to make mistakes and to have those corrected. And of course, when you get back manuscripts from editors, or a manuscript is published and you notice there have been changes made, take a note of those changes and learn from them. What I do often find in people writing in English as a second language, some of whom write very good English and have very good translators, but some of whom make common mistakes, they keep making those mistakes because they don't pick up and learn from the writing and the editing that they get back. So just to summarise, I strongly believe there isn't such a thing as academic writing. There's only good writing and bad writing. I think the biggest problem is not writing, so you've got to have the courage to write. Write and don't edit. Don't surround yourself with every possible idea in the papers that you've read. Try to write what you want to write and support those points. And otherwise, away from the process, in terms of content, try to cut out words, try not to repeat things too often, try to refer to points next to the actual point, don't gather the references at the end of the sentence, and finally try to find a way of writing review articles in an integrated way. Don't just give a list of papers and who said what. So that's all I want to say about poor academic writing, or common mistakes in academic writing. I hope you found it useful, and as usual, thank you very much for listening.